we're just going to start with a karakia, seeing as this is our first event of the summit. Tutawa mai I ruka, tutawa mai I raro, tutawa mai I roto, tutawa mai I wau. Kia tau wai, te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, huie, taikie. So this karakia is about coming forth from above, from below, from within, and from the environment. It's about vitality and well-being and strengthened in unity, which is what the summit is all about. So kia ora koutou, welcome everybody, welcome to those who are joining us online, welcome to those in here in the room, and I'm so pleased that the little storm has gone through and we've got not as much wind as we did before. My name is Monique Kelly. I'm one of the trustees of WOW. I'm also the program director, so I'm really looking forward to this. This is our 5th annual summit. We're really here to help communities to transition to a low emissions regenerative future. And our role is to inspire, to educate, and to enable. So hopefully a lot of you are going to be coming to the different events we've got running over the next 10 days really now, because we're kicking off a little bit earlier, but definitely beginning next Tuesday. But we wouldn't be able to be here without the support we get from our community. And one of the hugest supporters that we've had in every single WOW has been Ripon. So this beautiful whare that we're in at the moment is thanks to Ripon. So a massive thank you to the family for providing this for us. For the kai, we have FreshLink to thank. We really wanted to have the opportunity for people to network and to talk, discuss. We're the ones who are going to make change happen. To do that, we need to communicate. So thank you, FreshLink, for providing the kai, and Ripon for the wine that we've been able to enjoy up till now. Conscious is another one. Conscious has been incredible. I can't believe the town and the communications that have gone out about getting this message forward. So a huge thank you to Anna and your team at Conscious. Today we're going to use, this is interactive, so both online and in person. We're using menti.com as a Q&A app. So if you've got your phone, jump onto menti.com. You just put in the code, then you can ask questions, you can vote up questions if you like. We'll put the screen back on again, but jump on that so that we can really have this interactive. And now I'm going to hand it over. This is about regeneration. It's about regeneration at a global level, and we're so honoured to have Paul Hawken here with us tonight via Zoom, and to have Dr. Carly Green, who is going to lead the talk. So I'm now going to hand over to Carly. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you so much for your lovely karakia. I hope one day to be able to do the same. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to this evening. As Monique said, we're super excited to be able to host Paul Hawken here this evening. But firstly, my name's Carly Green. I'm also on the board of trustees for WOW. Super excited to be involved with the group and to sit here at our 5th summit. So well done, team. So I'm local. I live in Lake Hawea. I've been working in climate change for about 20 years, predominantly with governments and large organisations around reporting of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm going to be basically hosting Paul tonight, but with the help of you providing the questions as well, hopefully through Menti. So make sure you've downloaded it on your phone. But first, let's introduce Paul. So Paul Hawken is an environmentalist, an entrepreneur, an author, an activist, and he's basically dedicated his life to environmental sustainability and changing relationships between business and the environment. He's one of the environmental movement's actual leading voices and a pioneering architect of corporate reform and respect to ecological practices. His work includes founding successful ecologically conscious businesses, writing about impacts on commerce, on living systems, and consulting with heads of state and CEOs on economic development, industrial ecology, and environmental policy. Paul's written a massive 9 books, including 6 national and New York Times bestsellers. The most recent of his books are Drawdown and Regeneration, but also Growing a Business, Next Economy, Ecology of Commerce, and Blessed Unrest. Those books are published in 30 different languages and sold over 90 countries. Oh my God, Paul. And his reach is obviously very global in its extent. His latest book, Regeneration, which we're here tonight to talk about, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation, was published in September 2021. And this represents his sequel to Drawdown. He's the founder of both the Project Drawdown and Project Regeneration, with Project Regeneration being the world's largest, most complete listing and network of solutions to the climate crisis. So we're looking forward to the conversation, Paul, and let me welcome you to Ripon on the shores of Lake Wanaka, and if you could see the view out the back behind me, you'd be inspired, I'd say, as much as we are about your books. It's just such an honour and privilege to have you here this evening. I'd like to kick off by asking you, why did you first create and write Drawdown, and then followed up with Regeneration?
Well, first of all, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much, Carly. Lovely to meet everyone else who is in the audience today, and thank you so much for being here with me. And lucky people that you are living in New Zealand, I'll tell you. Whatever your problems are, whatever you think how dysfunctional your country may be at time, you do not live in America. And so you can just count your blessings every single day. So Drawdown really, in 2001, there was a third assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and each successive assessment was more dire than the prior one, and in part because the IPCC assessment is supposed to be consensus science. And as scientists in the room will tell you, there's no such thing as consensus science. Science is evidentiary. It's not based on getting people together and agreeing. And but what was being agreed upon was really, you know, the Venezuelans, the Russians, and the Saudis, and the Chinese Americans tamping down basically their reports in terms of their urgency, really. But anyway, I read that, and then right after I read it, 9/11 happened in New York City. And I think everybody in the world was shocked. We were shocked, but all I knew was one thing: the world would never be the same. That's all you could tell. And I had a long talk with myself, and I kind of wondered, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And given the unknowns that we were going into, and I decided that the only measure that I would use is, can I be helpful? Whether it's to a person or to a place, or just keep it simple and keep it understandable and keep it direct. And at that time, I started to go around and ask people, why don't we have a list of the most salient and impactful solutions to reversing global warming? That was my question. At the Princeton, I went to big environmental NGOs. I went to friends, and nobody had an answer, really, as to why we didn't. But they said, why don't you make one? And I said, if I knew how to do that, I wouldn't be asking you to do one. And so it went for 3 years, and finally I gave it up. But what I wanted to do then, and the name Drawdown is important, is that I wanted to name the goal. And up until then, and frankly, until this very day, people talk about fighting climate change, combating it, tackling it, mitigating it, you know, all these interesting, really male verbs, war and sports metaphors. And I wanted to name the goal, and the goal that made sense was to it was drawdown, which is that moment when greenhouse gases peak in the atmosphere and begin to go down on a year-to-year basis. That's what the goal is. I mean, what else could it be? With respect to the atmosphere, I'm not talking about in a larger sense. And so in 1914, I started Project Drawdown. In 1917, we published the book with the help of 70 young scientists around the world and about 128 advisors. And I wanted it to be a we talking to we. In other words, I didn't want it to be a me talking to others, you know, or something like, I know you don't listen up, which is a lot of the climate literature, with all due respect. But it was very important to me that it was a consensus, not, well, I just said consensus doesn't exist in science, but I mean a coming together of a community of people who'd really done their homework and done the research on those solutions. But I always knew then that Drawdown was very much about the what, but I knew before I completed Drawdown that I was going to write Regeneration. Because regeneration is really how, and it's really about people. And I think we forget that climate systems are social systems. They're inextricable. And I think what we hear and what we read, and maybe even, you know, fall prey to ourselves, is talking about the climate as if it was a problem. And it's not a problem. We're the problem. And the climate is the perfect expression of the biosphere. And and who's having the biggest impact on the biosphere, which is Homo sapiens. So I wanted to be very much about the how and bringing in community and people and understanding. And you know, as in Maori, you know, Tanata, Whenua, in other words, indigenous people, the 5,000 indigenous cultures and tribes in the world, and to bring in what is the observational science that has been developed over thousands and 10,000s of years by people of the land. In other words, and how else could you stay in the land for a long time if you did not understand what was going on there and how to interrelate with it in such a way that not only you could thrive, but those, you know, generations and generations ahead would also thrive. And that fundamental understanding, you know, has been sorely lost. And I also feel like the climate conversation has gotten a little bit off track because I think there's a tendency to think it's a checkoff list, or if you get this right, or what's the most impactful thing I can do, and all that sort of stuff. And when we use words like fighting, Carly, and you know, those kind of metaphors, we are othering climate as if it was separate. And actually, if I'm going on probably a little bit too long to the question, but climate doesn't even exist. It's a dynamic between warm air and warmer water. That's it. Weather exists for sure, but you can't fight something that doesn't exist. You can't beat it and you can't combat it and so forth. So I think what and I see you all in a room gathering as a community for, and that's exactly where real solutions arise. You know, they don't arise from a militaristic or attitude towards it as if it's something we could beat. And the title, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation, the subtitle, means that within a generation, we are like what you are today everywhere in the world, which is coming together, acting, progressing in such a way that we can see that we understand the problem, we know what to do, or at least we know what we can do at that point, and we are learning together, and in that process, you know, moving towards a time when we can reverse global warming.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think definitely, having read through your book, I really feel like you do put people at the front of the discussion, and I actually personally found this quite powerful because I'm a data person. I come from an engineering background, and so I've always been about the data. But in the last decade or so, as I've started to sort of understand more about how to use the data, not just what the data is, I've realised that people get in the way. So they get in the way of themselves almost, right? So I was wondering, I personally found this thinking maybe I should have done anthropology, because really to make change, you know, the information is useful, but really you need to be empowered to make change. And how can you feel you can make change if you're fighting this thing that you don't even know or doesn't actually exist as you're talking about? So I wonder, I guess definitely putting people at the front of our minds, it sort of evoked a little bit of confidence in me that we can actually make change, because it's actually us that needs to do something, right? So it's kind of almost like an awakening of human nature in itself. Like, you know, it is our responsibility. We've put ourselves here. We have to get ourselves out. So I guess you know, having worked through your book a little, and how is Project Regeneration, not necessarily the book, but the project that you're working on, sort of tries to help achieve this sense of, you know, empowerment to actually be part of the solution rather than you know, just feel like it's too hard.
That's a really big question.
Sorry.
I want to go back to your data point just for a minute. I'm a data nerd too, so I really respect that. In the book, there's 7,262 citations in Regeneration.
Yeah.
Okay, but to me, data is like a dance floor, and what we want to do at a dance floor is dance, not make another floor. And so the data, we change because of stories. We don't change because of facts. It's just, that's a fact. And so we need the science, but the science is the basis upon which we create new stories and better stories. And so that's what regeneration is very much about. I think we have in the world many organizations now that are working, I want to say, you know, directing their attention to the crisis at hand. And the crisis at hand is our ignorance and our ignoring of it, and our continuation of methods, economic methods of extract and exploitation and harm. And so that's the crisis. The weather is actually simply feedback. And the Earth is one system, and in a way, we're being homeschooled by our mother. And that's feedback. And any system that ignores feedback perishes. We know that. So all change arises really from a very small point and grows. It doesn't arise from something large. Movements don't happen overnight. And so I feel like what we're trying to do in regeneration is really, eventually, we haven't done it yet, by the way, but create a kind of lateral sense of the thousands of organizations, people just like you, but in different languages and places and different backgrounds, who are coming together and really focusing on what they can do, what they know, what they care about, and then acting accordingly. And it's really important that we understand that that's sufficient. Now, sufficient means that's all you can do. You don't want to, you know, you don't want to burden yourself with shame and blame and guilt and terror and fear, because it paralyzes you. It doesn't mean that the science isn't good and that if you have fear, it's well placed. You know, I mean, it's good science. It's the biggest science project in the history of humanity, is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's number one. So humanity has never come together this way on a science project, and the science is extraordinary. Now, but, you know, we have to draw a line in our life, you know, which is say, to the scientist and to the implication of the science in terms of impacts on water, heat, no water, drought, migration, oceans, acidification, biodiversity, extinction, pollinator death. It's, I mean, I have the whole list. I'm sure you do too. But to essentially just say, got it. Thank you. Now, let's go to work. Because there's no point in just outclassing somebody else's list of what's going wrong. And a lot of what's going to impact us in the next 30 years is actually locked in. I mean, I know this isn't what people want to hear, but I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I just got an invitation to give a talk about how regenerative agriculture in the Bay Area will help address climate change in the Bay Area. And I said, you don't want me to give that talk because it's not true. It won't. It have 100 wonderful beneficial effects. And cumulatively it can from all over the world, but it's not as though you can change it in your place in that way. And I think that, knowing that it's locked in, knowing that what's locked in is increasing climatic disruption, is sane, and it's very sober. But I would flip that one and say, okay, that's where we are. Why are you here? Why are you here at all? Why did you come now? I didn't have any choice in the matter. Well, but why are you here now? I mean, why are all of us here right now? And if we're not here to restore life on Earth, then what's left? I mean, what other purpose could there be that would animate and make our life meaningful in our existence, whether it's the next 60 years or 10 years or 30 years? It doesn't matter. We don't know how long we're going to live, but we do know that, like all people, we want a sense of dignity, purpose, and meaning, and all people do. And that's what this endeavor brings to all of us, to our children, to the elders, to all those in between. And it brings respect, I think, to cultures that have been trying to, talk to us. And I say us meaning Westerners, colonialists, that's just some of the us. It's not all the us, but the us that have led the way to basically harm and destroy the living world. There are these beautiful, wonderful voices and wisdom keepers around us, who are guides, and they're here with us. And this is people. And I say in the book, if you want to know what to do, listen to the people who paid the highest price. And there's women, children, people who are poor in indigenous cultures. They will tell us what to do. They know. We have to listen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we feel it, I guess, because of our Pacific neighbours are probably the first to really feel those impacts. So, yeah, we definitely are aware of how close it is to us and to our whānau. You're talking about basically the impacts we've had on the climate. A lot of it's locked in now for at least for the next few decades at least anyway. We aren't very good at as inhabitants on this planet to change behaviour for future reward. I think we don't like delayed gratification generally, humans, and so I know pretty much everyone in the room here is here because they want to be part of the solution, but I'm sure we all have members or whānau who aren't here, who maybe don't have that same desire. So I was wondering, how do we motivate others around us to make change or be part of the solution, and start to consider themselves as being not separate to the issue, but part of the solution?
By having more fun.
Yeah, I like that. I'm up for more
Seriously,
fun. Yeah,
better music, better dancing, better, I mean, better food,
yeah,
better parties, better esprit de corps. People, look at, a lot of people are the mouse in the maze, looking for the cheese at the end, okay? They don't know they're a mouse, they don't know they're in the maze, and they think the cheese is a reward, okay? So it's not, those people are not going to jump aboard, because they still think if they can get that cheese, that cheddar cheese at the end of the maze, that somehow life is going to be better. And of course, it never is. So that's why I wasn't being frivolous when I was saying have more fun. I'm saying that when we were children, where did we go? The kids that were fighting on one end of the playground, or the ones who were having fun on the other? We went to where the kids were having fun. And we're adults and we're no different. And so that's what I mean about drawing a line between the understanding of the science, which is extraordinary and in all senses of the word, but then to really draw a line and say, okay, now who am I going to be? What am I going to do? And how am I going to do that? And I think this is lost, when people all get together at Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, next month, and meetings and so forth. One of our board members, African American, A.Y. Young, got to sing in the Blue Zone in Glasgow. Okay, and you can see him. He's amazing. He has a song called Regeneration. He's just one of the most amazing people I've ever known. But anyway, he was asked to sing in the Blue Zone, and there was over 1,000 people drinking champagne, black tie, dinner. Give me a break. I mean, like, what are you thinking? I mean, when I say have fun, I didn't mean, have a tin ear, and so he was shocked, that what he was looking at, it was like a upper class gala, and so I won't name names. I know some of the people that are there, but it's like, where does change come from? Where does change come from? It comes from people who are lit up. And if you're not lit up, that's okay. Find somebody who is and follow them. I mean, it's that simple. I worked with Martin Luther King when I was a lad, and watched the leadership of the Southern Christian Leadership Council and, all that sort of stuff. And as a photographer, but I saw leadership. I saw amazing people, who could bring other people together, just by their words, and by their spirit and by their dedication and by their fearlessness, And it's no different now. It's not about civil rights, although in a very deep way it actually is about the rights of civilization, civil, and it's definitely about the rights of all human beings and all living beings.
yeah, nice. You used the word fearless there. It's something that resonated with me also in your books. How do we encourage others around us to be fearless instead of hopeful? I mean, I think we all need to be, like you say, it's about having fun, but that's about good leadership and good, and also like that fearless falls under good leadership. I feel, at least that's how I try to live my life. Get in front of people and just do stuff. How do we motivate those who are scared of being fearless?
By being fearless. I mean, what that answer came about, or that comment came about for me when, this happens many, many times, and people say, well, are you hopeful? I mean, you've done these books, all these solutions and everything. I say, no, I'm not hopeful at all. I'm not interested in hope, because hope is the mask of fear. You can't have hope unless you're afraid. And you may not give voice to what it is you're afraid of, but the hope is the thing that you wouldn't have hope if you weren't concerned that something might happen if you didn't have hope. And that's when I said what we need to be is fearless, and that's courageous. Courage is hard, courage. And it's really, and it sounds maybe a little like a greeting card or something like that, but it's really about falling in love with the living world. And if you do have a lack of motivation or lack of sense of connection, or gee, I don't know what I want to do, go outside and spend time outside and just listen, watch, just slow down. And the beauty, the magnificence, the intricate, mysterious interconnections of the living world. I mean, if you slow down, they come to you and you see it, and you see yourself completely differently as well. When you may or may not realize that we're just the same as dragonflies, and phytoplankton and everything else in the living world, and fungi and, lion cubs, everything. We are complex, self-organizing living organisms, and we are intricately connected to every other living thing on this planet, And I think it's kind of like we know that about maybe our family, or maybe our community, or maybe our culture, like the Maori. But most people don't have that to a greater extent, and they don't have it with the living world. And they've made a distinction between themselves as human beings and the living world. But if you can anneal that, if you can heal that, if you can reconnect that broken circuitry, I think that's where fearlessness comes, because you're in love. It's not fear from bravado and, that kind of fearlessness. No, it's the fearlessness of being so in love with the living world and the people you share it with, your family, your community, and those who you share with whom you don't know by name, like pollinators and things in the ground and microbes and, all the beautiful birds that bless our skies. Then when that comes about, then you know what you do know what to do, and you're not going to find it in a book. Books can give you ideas like Drawdown and Regeneration. I hope they do. Maybe pique your curiosity, or saying, oh yeah, I studied that when I was a kid. I really loved it, but I went this way, and I think I want to go back to that now. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, every place, and everything. But you don't have to, but you have to have faith that is the emergent property that's going to heal this earth. Nothing else can. It can't be healed from on top. It can't be healed with direct air capture machines, that suck carbon out of the air and bury it in the ground. It can't be healed by ESG investments, environmental social governance, criteria investments. It can't be healed by stock markets. It can't be healed by investment bankers. It can't be healed by, movie stars and celebrities. It can only be healed by what you see, or what I'm seeing right now on the screen. That's it. And all the infinite ways that we can come together and configure our relationships and our understanding together and organize.
Nice. I've got a couple of questions from the audience, Paul, and I thought I might share some of the most popular ones we've got so far. I think I'll start with this one. So at the moment in New Zealand, we've got a new policy coming out around agriculture emissions, and agriculture represents our largest emission source actually in New Zealand, because we have quite clean renewable energy like infrastructure. So most of our energy is coming from renewables. So it shines a light, I guess, on agriculture as an emission source. One of the questions from the audience is, a lot of people in this sector, and particularly influential members of the sector, believe that tech solutions are the way to go. And it's probably not unlike other sectors really in trying to reduce emissions, that people believe technology will will get us there in the end. There's a silver bullet out there somewhere. What do you think about that?
Well, I come from California, and my great-grandfather had a farm where Apple Computer is today, so that goes way back in our family, that sense of place, and I wish we had that land still. So I'm at the heart of that thinking. I'm not saying it doesn't exist elsewhere, of course, but I mean in terms of using technology as a way to solve it. So what should we question about that picture? Let me just sort of break that up a little bit. Let's suppose that today, or tomorrow, all electricity and all transport was powered by renewable energy. It's over. It's done. Okay. We're still going over the cliff because we have been told that if we can stop emitting the major source of greenhouse gases, which is the combustion of coal, gas, and oil, to be sure, that it's sort of, we get a hall pass to the 22nd century. You're good to go. The fact is, and I go back to science on this, Carly,
Sure.
that every living system on Earth is collapsing. Every living system on Earth is collapsing and receding and dying. And there's not one peer-reviewed scientific paper published in the last 30 years that refutes that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
No one's prepared to make those statements, Paul. If they do that...
Because you're... Yeah, that's right. It's science. You have to be very, very, very careful. I can say it because I'm a journalist. I'm not going to lose anything, my credentials, but that's just a fact. And so while we want to change out our energy system, no question about it, which is a technological solution, we want to change out our transportation. I would call it the mobility system, because I think mobility definitely is a human longing and human right. And we definitely want to change out, other aspects where we have technical solutions, but to think that they are going to be the deliverance that we hope will happen sometime in the future, like net zero commitments by corporations in 2050. I mean, bring it on, but don't think that somehow that's going to solve our problems. It will not. And our problems are going to be solved in place where we are, our streams, our rivers, our coastlands, our farmlands, our forests, our pollinators, our people, our children, our healthcare systems. That's where it's going to be solved. And so regeneration, the reason I chose that title is so important because, what we saw this year in 22, the we being most of the world, I would say, but we saw impacts that we had never seen before. When Dante espied Beatrice on the Ponte Vecchio, in Florence, there was water under the bridge. And there isn't one historical account of the Po River drying up for over 2,000 years until this year. So that and the Rhine and the Yangtze River all dried up. The floods, the this, you read it all. Maybe you haven't. If you haven't, that's cool. But the point being, this was a very unusual year in terms of temperature, drought, too much water, too little water, and all the ancillary sort of impacts and things that caused. Okay. But what that tells me is that we have an economy that's totally extractive. It takes life. We've taken it for granted. We just assumed it was okay. You take life, you transfer it into products and services, get capital, and you have money, and then you invest the money in what? Doing it some more. And to make more money, and that's what we were born into, and we probably all made money in that way, in some way or another. But the point being is we now can see the road of extraction, where that extraction economy in that system goes, and it's a dead end. It stops. It doesn't go much further, and we're on that road. So regeneration is really about going, do we really want to go further down the road of degeneration? Because that's what we're doing. Or do we want to stop, get together, talk about it, and pivot? Because there is no reason whatsoever that we cannot create an economy with beautiful work for people, with prosperity, with GDP, that meaningful work, and living wages for people, that creates more life instead of less. And we're the mouse in the maze. We think it's less life. That's, we're all doing that thing. And with regeneration, it's about saying, well, actually there's another way. And the reason there's another way is because regeneration is innate to being a human being. It's not a concept out there. ESG, B Corp, sustainability, blah, 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 net zero, 15C. These are all concepts. But regeneration is innate. All 37 trillion cells in your body are regenerating right this second, and this second, and this second, and this second, or you wouldn't be listening to me, you'd be dead. So, you are regeneration. But it's the default mode of life. And so what we're talking about collectively is about, can we move our civilization into alignment with biology, with life? Can we just get in alignment with it? Because that's what we're talking about. And so it is the opposite of being sort of conceptual. It is the most radical thing of all, because it goes right to the root. Radical means root. It's the root cause and the root cure. And the last thing I want to say about regeneration is that every time you care about somebody, something, your child, your friend's children, your grandparents, somebody who's an elder, who's not doing well, your pets, your place, your culture, your language, whatever, every time you care, that is regeneration, because you're absolutely thinking about more life for that situation, that person, those people. So care is innate. That's the human heart. That's courage. That's falling in love. We are lovers. We do love others, okay? And so regeneration is about coming home to who we innately are, as opposed to, this Hawken guy has some idea, he wrote a book, let's see what he's talking about. No, you know.
Nice. One of the, another question I have here is, I know with WOW, we're all about, as Monique said in the opening, we're about education and enabling and inspiring people to make change. And one of those things that we really pride ourselves is around making these moments happen. We try to make them happen throughout the year, but then also during the summit in particular. And those moments are around connecting with people and hopefully allowing those connections to expand. And they have been for the last 5 years. I'm wondering, are there any other good news stories or any other good examples that you know of that are happening in this sort of connection and action space, which I know is the last chapter in your book, because I find that really quite important about how to make those connections and take action, or take action through and make connections through that process. So can you give us any examples that you know where that's really being effective? It'd be interesting from your global view.
We know hundreds and hundreds of them.
That's exciting.
That's what I'm trying to convey to you, is that there's so many. And what Damon Gameau in Australia and myself, he and I go back quite a long time. And what we're trying to do is create a means, on the web for sure, digitally, but where we can start to connect it all together in such a way that you can go in, you can enter anywhere you want. It's not my URL, his URL, or somebody. It's just any URL. But you go into this milieu that you're talking about of people and organizations and groups all over the world who have found a way and a path to creating regeneration there. And again, whether they use the word or not is irrelevant. You know it when you see it. And so that we can all feel like we're part of something larger. It doesn't mean we don't keep focusing on what's at hand. But I feel like the way information and the news comes at us it does make us feel a little bit isolated, like we're alone and these bigger forces are at play, and they certainly are, but it doesn't mean the little forces aren't at play. And when you do study living systems, and in all its aspects, it's all the little things that make a difference, not the big things. I'm not saying keystone species don't make a big difference in an ecosystem, but they do. But it's all the little things that created that keystone species. And so I just feel like, I mean, almost every day, Carly, I see something that's happening, and I toss it over to the team, and that becomes part of this ecosystem that we're trying to create by showing the connections. And there's a principle here that's scientific, but in an immune system, the way you make an immune system stronger and more resistant is to connect more of it to itself. If you want to heal an ecosystem, you connect more of it to itself. You don't do it from the outside. The same thing with social systems and economic systems. We have to connect more of us to ourselves, more of it to itself. That's how we heal this world. But it can only be done person by group by row by question by conversation at a time. It's just step by step by step by step, and it may seem slow, but see where fast is getting us. I mean, that's not helpful. And the beauty of global warming is that it is slow, actually, relative to civilization, and we do have time. And we have all the time we need and no more to actually reverse global warming and restore life on Earth. Yeah. But I can send you a whole list of groups. I'll send you a whole list.
That'd be nice. Thanks. I'll share
Yeah.
it. I'll share it with everyone. Just,
Yeah.
I guess, as individuals and then coming together in these small groups that we do, we do try to, like you say, we do have lots of fun, and then also just progress things forward. But I wonder, what role do you think the larger global partnerships or have in I guess accelerating us to be able to end the climate crisis in one generation? So how do we? Is it important to make sure that those global partnerships are strong to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve?
Well, I think all partnerships are important. I mean, because that's a connection. And so we consider the people, the groups we connect to are partners. We call them partners. And that implication of that word is actually equality, between entities. I think there is also, I think one thing that's happening, in 2001 when Ogilvy and Mather worked with British Petroleum and individuated the cause and cure of, global warming, which is your carbon footprint. That came out of Ogilvy and Mather from British Petroleum. And the idea and the purpose was to do a figure ground shift, which we're not the problem. You drive a car, we're just an innocent, company drilling for oil and making gasoline for you, and so you have to calculate your carbon footprint and reduce it. And before then, but I mean, certainly that accelerated this idea that if you're an individual, you should use cold water in your washing machine and recycle your plastic and and bike whenever possible, and eat more local food, and try not to eat so much meat, and it's a checklist, and there's nothing wrong with the checklist, excepting that I think most people, when they look at the list and then they read the paper the next day about what's happening in the world in terms of weather, climate, and disruption and impacts, they know that those things are insufficient to the task at hand. And it's not that they're good things to do, they are good things to do. So the tendency has been to look to, national governments, to look at international agreements, to look at the Conference of the Parties, which has failed for 26 straight events, okay? And meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, next month. And or in my country, the Biden administration, who did pass something recently, the first time in 50 years, the United States has done anything substantive about climate. I mean, come on, 50 years. And so then what happens, I think, is there's a sense of disempowerment because you feel like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and then you do what you're doing, and it's important, it's right, ethically, and it does make a difference, but it's not, I mean, unless you have an IQ lower than room temperature, it's not enough, and so it creates this sort of ennui, this gap, this thing between these international, national, policy initiatives or potential ones, and then what you can do at home. And I would say what we try to do in Regeneration is talk about agency and a nexus in the website, which is actually it's everything in between. That's where it's happening. And so it's happening in communities, in neighborhoods, cities, it's happening in towns, it's happening in companies, happening in corporations, happening in colleges, happening in universities, it's happening in temples and churches and synagogues and provinces and counties, and that's where it's happening. And I hope it passes and does something on a national level eventually. A carbon tax would be great. A carbon tax and dividend would be very interesting incentives for people. There's lots of policy ideas, but I don't think we can wait for them. In other words, we can do everything we can to vote for them, to barrack for them, to try to make them happen. But at the same time, where we can really get things done is where the things that unite us are much more important than the things that divide us. And national politics is basically an industry of division and fear. And every so often, somebody wonderful in a small country gets elected, but beyond that, like, it doesn't really happen very often because it is an industry financed primarily by oil and big business. And so we're going to continue, I think, to be disappointed, but it doesn't mean we can't be effective. And because the real effect and the most powerful thing we can do is everything in between those two.
I have another question from the audience around basically how to inspire change. So the question is, if the solution to inspiring change is to have fun, does non-violent protest still have a place, even when it's not fun but impactful?
Well, I have fun was the first line in a whole bunch of things. They said that. Yeah, one of them was have fun.
We only heard fun.
I've been involved with nonviolent protests all my early life, and went to jail and got beat up and all that sort of stuff. So it's not fun, and for sure. But that's the thing about courage: either it's worth doing or not worth doing, and worth doing means that the principle at hand or the principle in question is almost, it's unquestionable, because it's always about life and honor and respect and dignity to other. And why would you protest otherwise? Why would you have a nonviolent protest? That's underneath all of them. And that's why they're nonviolent, because if they're violent, then you've just basically violated what it is about, And so I say, go for it. I mean, it's really important, you know. It's like witnessing, you know, and I mean, they can be just as powerful. Once I talked to a whole group of protesters in the United States, in California, you know, and I kind of looked at the protests and I said, you know, you guys should hire the Maori and learn a Maori haka. Like you have to teach it for them, it's their culture, but a haka for really confronting, you know, it's just like, get it together, you know, get disciplined, make it strong, you know, it's like, and not just like, oh, have a sign and walk around. So I think there's a lot of creativity left in the demonstration, violent protest area, where we can, I don't mean putting, you know, tomato soup on a Van Gogh painting in the National Gallery in London, I mean, whatever. I mean stuff where we come together and really, really open people's eyes and hearts.
Yeah. If you were to give us like 5 most impactful or realistic daily changes that we can all make as individuals to contribute to climate regeneration, what would they be? I'll let you take 3, actually.
Okay, 3. Okay, number 1 is food, without question. Unless you are, you know, have a private plane and flying to work every day. I mean, food is number 1. It's 32%, the food system, which is ag all the way to the point of consumption, is 32% of global emissions. So it's number 1. It surmounts transport as the number 1 cause. But it's not just emissions. You know, again, the farmers in New Zealand worried about nitrous oxide emissions, you know, from raising sheep, of course, you know, and they do it in concentrated areas, you know, to make a lot of money with their land and with the product, which is sheep, and ship it overseas. But there's a problem, you know, which is nitrous oxide, not to mention methane. But so the food you choose to eat is the most powerful thing you can do every day. And let's say you do it 3 times a day. It's like, first of all, what you eat and what it does to you. It's really, really important. Because people are eating foolish things, ultra-processed foods and things, and they end up in so-called healthcare system. You may have one there. We don't. We have a sick care system. It's 20% of our economy. It's $4 trillion a year, and people are just getting sicker. And but nevertheless, so you have to take responsibility for not being that person in as much as you can, and that has to do with what you eat. You know, it really, really does. We know so much now about a diet, and I don't mean this diet, that diet. Just don't eat all the things that are bad for you. We know what they are, and then you'll figure out the rest by yourself. You really will. I mean, you know. And so that's number 1. Number 2 is the impact food has on the land, on water, on animals, on pollinators, on the farmer's family for that matter. But the impacts are extraordinary and not seen when you drive by a field and it's all green and you go, wow, it looks cool. But when you actually start to look at the real impacts, they're quite significant, all the way to the dead zones, you know, in the oceans, you know, are coming from the United States and the Gulf, coming from the Midwest. You know, we're causing this, the dead zones in the oceans and so forth. And then you have basically, for example, in farming, and I know you don't know it, but but I mean, per se, most people don't. I didn't, anyway. But non-organic and non-regeneratively grown food, the seeds, the corn and the soy and so many wheat and so forth, are coated with neonicotinoids, also called neonics, and different nicknames. They're basically nicotine, which it sounds like, and they cause insects to die through excitement. Okay, their nervous system goes crazy and they die. Well, the problem is they're coating the seeds, and so the neonicotinoids go up in the plant, and in the leaves and in the corn or whatever, and insects eat them, birds eat insects, and so there's a cascade of basically mortality is caused by these little seeds. So again, when you're choosing, it's not like you can go to the grocery store and say, was this grown with seeds or coated with nicotinoids? It's not going to happen, but you can choose responsibly grown food, by farmers who care. And it costs more probably. Make the effort. It's important. It's crucial to do that. And then the next thing is try to get it locally as much as possible. I don't know if you like Oreo cookies, just forget about it. I don't know where they come from. I doubt they're made there in New Zealand.
No, they're not made here.
But I thank God for you guys. But the point being is that if you want to eat sweets, fine, but eat them there, where they are. Either have Manuka honey or this or that or what, I don't know, whatever. I mean, whatever. So it's not like, being a monk or a nun. It's just about eating your place. And that connects you to place and to people and to community and so forth. So those are the three really, there's more to food than that and so forth, which is the whole food industry, its impact. 60% of what Americans eat is ultra-processed food, 50% of the Brits, ultra-processed food, which means our taste buds got biohacked by big food because we have a genetic predisposition to sugar, salt, and fat. And we desire it and can't get enough of it. And then that food is empty calories. It has no nutrition at all. And then we keep eating more and more, and it causes obesity, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. So doing that with your children, with your family, with yourself, in your locale, it's so, so, so important. That's number one.
Yeah, I think it's almost like I planted that question, but I didn't, because the WOW Summit this year is all quite a large focus on food and food resilience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you nailed that one. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Very good. I guess we've got a few more minutes, so I wanted to finish up with this question, and it's probably a loaded one, but are you optimistic about the future?
No, I'm not optimistic at all.
Me neither.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not pessimistic. Whoa. I'm not pessimistic.
No, I'm not a pessimistic person either.
No, I just feel like optimism is... look, you don't have to look. Every morning I spend 2 hours reading everything RFID feeds. Nature, Science, The Guardian, The Post, Financial Times, New York Times. I just read for 2 hours, scanning, the zeitgeist of the world and how the world is talking to itself and what the news actually is. And it's hard. It's really hard, put it that way. It's a difficult way to begin the day. It'd be much worse to end the day that way, so I start the day that way. Okay. But there are days, when I feel like, whoa, human beings are so brilliant. They're just incredible. There's two women who started a company called Ruby, R-U-B-I, and they're making viscose, which is a third of all garments are made of viscose, It's like a synthetic, but they're making out of waste CO2. So it's the fabric itself is sequestering carbon before you even make something with it, and it's just brilliant, just taking something, because clothing is 8 to 10% of global emissions. If we got to number 3, it would have been clothing. By the way, I didn't go there, but there's another company, Chinese scientist in Maryland, in United States, and he's for 10 years. He's been doing research, actually funded by DARPA-E, U.S. government agency, and he's created wood. I want a piece of wood. I don't have a piece of wood here, but he's created wood by boiling and compression and pressure that, let's say, it's like I don't know if you can see but about a quarter inch, like stick like this, that's long,
Yep.
stick like that.
Yep.
Okay, you cannot bend it, you cannot break it. If you put it on a curb, where the curb is on an angle and you drive over it, your car will go up and down, but it won't break. And the best material is bamboo for it, or waste products from forestry, branches and chips and so forth. And it is 3 times stronger than steel and 1/6 the weight. And it doesn't burn.
Impressive.
It is impressive.
Yeah.
It's just that it can replace steel and concrete everywhere in the world. And if the World Trade Center had been built of this wood, right, this structurally, the jet would have just simply been stuck inside it. It doesn't burn, and it doesn't collapse. And there would have been a horrible incident, but I'm just saying the building would not have collapsed. And so there is now like Archeon, which is a Berlin company, and they're making omega-3s oils. Okay, we need 3, 6s, and 9s. Okay, but we don't get 3s enough unless you eat fish or flaxseed, and or beef. You can get it in beef as well, by the way. But the point being is a lot of the world doesn't get omega-3s. It doesn't get enough at all. They're making it out of, again, CO2. Feedstock is CO2, and they're making omega-3s. And so I can just go on and on with some of the breakthroughs that are happening, and people just reimagining this relationship between what's here, there's things here, and how to make them in such a way that actually sequester carbon and make a better, healthier product end of the day, it's going to work better and save lives and create meaningful jobs and so forth. So there's hundreds of things going on right now. And so every time I read or hear about one from somebody or read about it, I feel optimistic.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I think that brings, we're at our time, Paul. So
Okay.
have you got anything else you'd like to add for us as a parting words to us to take home with us?
I think that I work with 2 of the biggest companies in the world on their food chain. They have the 2 biggest supply chains in the world for food. And they both committed to regeneration. And they mean it. And I've been around companies enough to know when it's the slogan and when it's
true.
actually
Yeah.
embedded. But when I work with them, and we're talking about 5 million farms. Okay, 5 million farms converting to regenerative agriculture, and those 2 companies are creating the biggest agricultural transition since 1910.
Yeah.
Since the Haber-Bosch method of ammonia was invented, that made nitrogen cheap for soils. And but when I'm talking, they're doing regeneration throughout the company: plastics, paper, transport, every aspect. They're looking at it from that point of view. And regeneration is a lens. It's a framework. It's a lens. We're looking at the world in a certain way. And what's so interesting is that one of these companies taught me something, because I came across, I'd written up some principles years ago that they embodied in terms of net zero emissions and zero waste, etc. But the CEO came back to me, the CEO for whom I wrote the speech, said, I didn't realize, I thought they were aspirational goals. And what I realized is those goals are binary. Binary, which means you either are doing it or you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then keep thinking.
Yeah.
But you don't do, you may have to continue to do it. That's why you're making something, but you're thinking. And so it's really this It's about learning and asking questions and just using that simple thing. Are we creating more life or less life? Creating less life, probably a no-go. More life, how do we do that? And even if it's in small ways, it's really, really important because that's the journey.
Yeah, it is a journey. And I
Thank
can't
you so
agree
much.
more. It's the small things that matter. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Carly. Lovely being here with you.
Yeah, so I'd like you to join with me, everyone. Paul can't hear you, but he can see you. So please express your gratification.
I can hear you. I can hear it. That's great. I heard that too. It's amazing. Thank you so much. I wish I was
thank
there.
you. Thanks. Did you want to say something,
Okay.
Monique? Yes. So thanks, Paul. I'll just hand over to Monique.
Okay.
An enormous thank you to you, Paul. I just wanted to leave with a karakia, and I think it's really apt as I was listening and frantically trying to have my friend send me through the best karakia. Sorry, Penny's telling me to go to the centre. Toi tu te mare a tāne, toi tu te marae a takaroa, toi tu te tangata. If we look after the forest, if we look after the sea, we look after the people. And I think that was your message to us, is that we need to look to the soil, to the sea, to the land, to who we are, and then we will be okay. I'm optimistic that we can do it. So
Good.
thank you, everyone, and thank you, Paul, and a huge thank you to Carly as well.
Thank you so much.
We still have Ripon Hall, we still have food. So one of the big things around the summit is, this networking and connecting. If you have people in the room that you don't know, get to know them. This is how we're going to make a big shift in our community and start to really change and shift that dial. So go and enjoy yourself, have another drink, enjoy some food, and get talking. It's all about fun.
Thank you.